Hi everyone, so I am going to do a little bit more of an in-depth history of my medical issues and my health journey and everything. I did a video with kind of an overview of it before that I will link down in the description, but I wanted to do a little bit more in depth, and I'm going to try to make this as concise as possible. I've tried recording this once already and it just got too long and my phone ended up cutting me off actually, so we're going to try to keep this concise, as concise as possible for 18 years. This spans 18 years. My history, my health history. So, all right, so going back, this all started in 1997 when I was 15 and I was working at a camp and I was outside all the time and I got the flu in the middle of the summer. No one really thought anything of it. No one else around me was sick, but no red flags went up and I got better and things seemed okay. That October, I started getting migraines. I was really fatigued. I was having some other weird symptoms. I was having a neurological issue where like my eye was droopy and just having a bunch of problems. So I ended up seeing a neurologist who was not helpful at all and was also seeing a chiropractor that my family had been seeing for a long time, and she actually suggested that it sounded like it could be Lyme disease. So she referred me to my first Lyme doctor, who diagnosed me mainly clinically, mainly based on symptoms and history. There were some tests that showed some things that were indicative of Lyme, but in and of themselves couldn't really be diagnostic. So I started on antibiotics then and started seeing improvement in my symptoms and stuff. Was on antibiotics for about 8 months and then got to a point where I had a reaction to one of the antibiotics I was on, and the doctor I was seeing didn't really have any other options for me at that point. So I opted to stop treatment and see how I did on my own. And I did fine. I did relatively fine for a couple of years until the fall of 2000 when I went off to college, and the stress of that kind of brought things out again. And so I went in search of a new doctor because the previous doctor had kind of run out of things to try for me. So I started seeing my second Lyme doctor, who put me back on oral antibiotic treatment, and then she actually referred me to another doctor who she felt would have some more ideas for me. He was out of state. It was about 4 hours to go each way to go and see him. So even though he thought that moving on to more aggressive intravenous antibiotics, IV antibiotic treatment, might be beneficial for me, he was not comfortable doing that with that kind of distance. So he did, however, diagnose me with 2 other tick-borne illnesses, 2 co-infections, one called Bartonella and one called babesiosis or babesia. And I did treatment for those and saw some improvement with some symptoms with that, but was kind of at the point where he didn't have a lot of great options for me anymore, so ended up going back to the previous doctor, ended up finally getting on some IV antibiotics, some more heavy-duty antibiotics. So I ended up finally being able to get on a little bit more of an aggressive treatment protocol. Was started on my first round of IV antibiotics. For that I had a PICC line placed, and that I had for 6 months, and then at the 6-month point my insurance company said that they would not pay for more IV antibiotic treatment. During that time I also ended up getting gallstones from one of the antibiotics I was on, and I had my gallbladder removed. And but through the course of those 6 months of treatment actually made a lot of progress and was doing much better than I had been before I started on the treatment. So this brings us to the end of 2002 is when I stopped the IV treatment. I did okay for a while. I was on and off oral treatment and was able to kind of hold my own for a while. And then in 2004, by that time the doctor that I had been seeing had actually left and moved basically across the country. So I had to find a new doctor. So I ended up seeing, this is now my 5th doctor that I was on at this point, my 5th Lyme doctor. And she had some new ideas, had some new perspectives, and started me back on IV antibiotic treatment. This time I had my first port placed, which is a longer term IV access than a PICC line is. If people are interested in more information about the different kinds of lines, I can link information about that down below, or you can always Google it, or I can talk about it in a different video. So in July of 2004, I had my first port placed, and ended up still, even though I didn't have my gallbladder, I ended up having gallbladder attacks from the antibiotic that I was on still. So stopped that treatment, and that doctor that I was seeing referred me to someone else who she felt would have some other options. So again, was referred to another doctor. So this is now doctor number 6. He did have some new ideas. He did some more testing and ended up diagnosing me with dysautonomia. And I was started on treatment. I tried a couple of different treatments for that and didn't really see improvement until I started on IV fluid every day. And that made a huge difference for me at that point. And I was on various IV antibiotics and all kinds of different things and was slowly seeing some progress. Ended up in 2006 having all kinds of GI issues and basically not being able to eat for a couple of months. I don't even remember how long it was, 3 or 4 months at least. Lost a ton of weight, ended up finding a good GI doctor who diagnosed me with gastroparesis and got me on treatment, and I slowly got better from that and was able to start eating a little bit more, and slowly started recovering from that with treatment. At some point in between 2006 and maybe, I don't know, 2008, I went back to see the doctor I had been seeing. So doctor number 5, who is still my current doctor. And was on all kinds of different treatment protocols, would make progress, and then would kind of take some steps back. And it was a whole process of trying to figure out exactly what we needed to treat, how we needed to treat it, how much I could handle. There were some treatments that made me really, really sick, and I was nauseous and throwing up all the time. So it's been a long process, and I've been on almost every antibiotic that I have heard of people being on for Lyme, oral and IV. And I just have to say that over the course of all of these years of treatment, it seems like a lot of treatment, and it definitely has been a lot of treatment, but I have made so much progress that I'm so thankful that I had doctors who were willing to kind of stick it out and try to think of new ideas. In 2008, I ended up having my first port infection, so I had my first port for almost 4.5 years. Ended up with an infection, was in the hospital and on antibiotics, and had my second PICC line placed. Then in 2009, I had my second port placed because I was still on IV fluid and I was still on IV antibiotics. Not continuously necessarily, but still on them enough so that I needed the IV access. That port lasted 2.5 years or so, and then in 2011, I ended up with another infection and had to have that port removed. Had another one placed a few months later, and unfortunately ended up with a blood clot after just about 3 months of having that port. So ended up on blood thinners and obviously had that port removed, and while I was on blood thinners, couldn't have another port placed, so I had a PICC line. I had my third PICC line during that time. And then in February of 2012, just about a month before my wedding, finally had my fourth port placed, which is the one that I still have now. Then in March of 2012, got married, and then in about June, started talking to my doctor about pregnancy and antibiotics to be on during pregnancy. So I was switched to pregnancy-safe antibiotics, was treated throughout my pregnancy to prevent transmission to the baby, to Lex, and got testing done when he was born on the placenta and the cord blood, which came back negative, and continued on the same antibiotics while I was breastfeeding to again prevent transmission during breastfeeding through the breast milk. And I am now I'm 17.5-ish years out from my diagnosis, and am so much more functional, have a much better quality of life than I did, certainly at various times during the past 17 years. And I'm so thankful that I had doctors who were willing to think outside the box, think of new ideas, send me to someone else, and really try to figure out how to treat me best. And I don't think that I would be where I am today without all of that. So this is as brief as I could make this, and I am happy to talk more about anything that people have questions about. And yeah, so I hope this is helpful. I hope people are interested in knowing all of this, and I really am passionate about making sure people are aware of how bad Lyme disease can be and how prevalent it is. So thanks so much for watching, and I will talk to you again soon.